Hello one and all, and welcome. Today we have a very special video in store, and to get through it all, I've invited along the incredibly talented Black-Eyed Blonde to help us navigate these Skinwalker infested lands. The first 5 stories of this collaboration will be on my channel that you're watching right now, and the remaining 5 you will find over with her. So please be sure to follow the link on screen at the end of the video to finish off all 10. But now, without further ado, it's time to sit and get comfortable and let the darkness take control. My boyfriend, a couple of friends and I were on a road trip from Texas to Washington. I had driven the previous 8 hours, so I was sleeping in the front passenger seat whilst our friend was driving. At one point I was sure I was having a dream. My mind said it was around 3 AM because it was pitch black through the windscreen. When I looked over at our friend, I could see he was just staring at the road and driving. He looked a little stiff. Outside the window behind him, I thought I saw a deer's head, but instead of passing by the window, it was staying in place with it, and every once in a while I could see a flash of an arm, as if someone was swinging it whilst running. I woke up next morning in the parking lot of a convenience store. Everyone else was gone except me and the friend that was driving. I asked him where everyone was, and he said that they were in the bathroom. We just sat there quietly until I told him about my dream. The more I told him, the more pale he became, until he looked at me dead in the eyes with the worst look I've ever seen. He looked as if he were ready to die of fright. He told me I wasn't dreaming, that when we were all asleep, he was driving, and that he had seen something pale in the trees on the side of the road. He kept going, thinking it was a different kind of tree, as he saw something similar a couple of times after, until one of them began to move. When he looked at the rearview mirror, he said it looked like someone was running after the car, but it wasn't falling back like he'd expected, and caught up with the car with ease, despite us going 75 miles per hour. According to him, the man was of average height, but from the collarbone up, it had the head of a deer. He tried driving faster, but it would still keep pace with the car. He tried not to look at it, but he could tell it was still there, and stayed there for a good few minutes before he got into an area well lit within the city. And at that point he didn't have the heart to check his rearview mirror to see if it was gone. It terrifies me to think what it could have been. I've heard of something similar in Native American lore, but it's not supposed to be a good omen. So I try to push the matter out of my head as much as possible.
I've always been a bit of a skeptic, ever since I was a kid. Scary stories don't faze me, horror games never frighten me, and whenever I hear something weird at night, I instantly assume it's something normal, an animal or just the house settling. Despite this, something very unsettling happened to me the other day, and I'm really not sure what to make of it. I think it's the first time in years I've been genuinely frightened. I live in a forested area in the US. Me and my girlfriend live in a large cabin, and although there are roads nearby, our neighbors are at least a kilometer away. We also have 2 cats, one of which sleeps in the bedroom with us, whilst the other often goes out at night and does whatever cats do when they're out of sight. Anyway, I like to stay up late at night and sleep late into the morning, whereas my girlfriend is an early bird. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was watching crappy TV in the living room whilst my girlfriend slept in the bedroom. I was beginning to grow tired when I heard something outside, near the cat flap. For clarity, our cat flap uses an electronic chip, so only our cats can use it. I assumed it was just one of the cats coming into or leaving the house, and I ignored it. Then I heard it again. It sounded like something thudding against the flap. It happened several times at random intervals, until I lost my patience and decided to just go and open the door. Clearly, the cat was having trouble getting in. I never thought about it at the time, but this was weird because we feed our cats well, and they're very lean rather than chubby. I passed the bedroom and peered in as I walked past, to see if my girlfriend heard the noises. She was fast asleep, but the cat that sleeps with us was staring at the window. I called her name. Nothing. She kept staring. I shrugged it off and kept heading towards the kitchen. The back doors are through there, by the way. Anyway, so I reached the back door and saw a dark shape through the translucent flap. I sighed, expecting the cat to be out there, and opened the door. It took me a moment to open the door, and I saw the cat tense up as I opened the door. The door opened fully. I froze. It wasn't my cat. Whatever it was had started moving before I opened up, and I only caught a glimpse of a distorted figure, kind of like a tailless dog, bolting, and I mean absolutely pelting it. I freaked out and slammed the door shut. What the hell was it? I wasn't sure. My natural skepticism kicked in, and I assumed it was just my other cat, and I had merely startled it. Perhaps the darkness had made it appear larger. Nevertheless, I was creeped out and decided to go to sleep. As I slipped into bed, I realized something horrifying. The second cat was asleep on the rug. It took a while to get to sleep that night. Everything seemed normal until a few hours later. I awoke to a strange feeling of dread. Something wasn't right. My girlfriend was fast asleep. I held my breath and heard something creaking by the door. It sounded too loud to be one of the cats. It was if a person was walking about. I reached towards my bedside cabinet and flicked on the lamp. The room was illuminated, and I saw something standing just outside the open door, staring at me. The same twisted figure I had spotted outside earlier. It wasn't very tall, maybe a little over 5 feet, but it was its face that scared me the most. I only caught a glimpse of it, but what I saw will stay with me forever. It looked like a dog, but with an elongated face and almost human-like eyes. You know that weird distorted snarl hounds pull when they're pissed off? It had that expression. I instantly started yelling profanities as I scrambled backwards, trying to straighten up. The creature turned and sprinted down the hall. I heard it dash outside and go past the window behind us, just above the headboard. I managed to look out as my girlfriend started to panic as she woke up fully. We both caught a glimpse of whatever the hell this thing was as it dashed off into the woods near our home. Grabbing my trusty shotgun from beneath the bed, as well as a couple rounds from the ammunition box that sits next to it, I ran out of the room in my underwear and rounded into the kitchen. The door was open. I'd forgotten to lock it when I saw the thing originally. I haven't seen it since, and we still live in our cabin, but I bought sturdy locks for all the main doors and windows in the house, and always check the exit points at night. I also go to bed a bit earlier than I used to, so I'm asleep when the freaks of the night start to wake up. I've read a bunch of forums, and the only thing I can compare it to, based on what I saw, is a skinwalker. If you know anything about these things, please let me know.
In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed suicide, and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my father's passing, he and my mother owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mother could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out would not cover the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month, and I was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with the realtor and the lawyer. So for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things that had been going on. I quit my job, packed up my snowboard gear, grabbed my dog, and headed up in my dad's car, which he had willed to me. Now this was our family cabin that my parents rented out throughout the year when we were not using it. I had keys, as well as all the codes for the alarms, so I did not feel the need to inform the rental management company and advise them of my stay. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal, and nothing out of the unusual happened. I spent my days playing with my dog in the snow, snowboarding, and in the evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music, as well as drinking and smoking out on the balcony. I had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much shut in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVD/PlayStation for entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. Bottom story had the living room and the side guest bedroom, along with a small kitchen. The upstairs had another 2 rooms, along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into any of the other rooms, and always kept the doors leading into them shut. Anyway, the 3rd day came around, and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog, his name is Midnight by the way, playing video games, and watching DVDs. That day, it was pretty heavy snowfall, so I did not feel like trekking down the hill to the main road in order to use my car, and decided to stay indoors. That's when things began getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Both of these cabins had been empty for the past couple of days, and I knew that no one was currently occupying them. Around midday, whilst outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, as if someone had been there in the last half hour or so. I thought that maybe it was someone who was staying in a cabin near me, and that perhaps I hadn't noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. Alright, whatever. The prints lead away from my cabin, and they disappeared into the snow towards the denser part of the trees. I disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around, and I decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up into a listening position. This was followed by him jumping quickly off the bed and running downstairs into the living room. I lay in bed and stayed silent. I could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth, and after around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance as a sign that he had to pee or wanted to go outside. Shit. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to go outside to the driveway for him to do his thing. Only, he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull on his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the denser part of the trees, where the prints had been earlier. But he also kept sniffing out on the side of the house, and looking up towards the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go where he wanted me to, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. This was a bit unusual for him, but perhaps there were animals out in the forest, and he fancied chasing them. I, however, was not in the mood for chasing any animals, So, I pulled him back inside, and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was laying in bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind of hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing, the steps seemed to be spaced apart, like a man's length stride. So it was really freaking me out. Midnight was also hearing the noise, and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, with the expectation of me letting him out. Alright, you know what? I'm a tough guy, and at the time considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes, along with my cigarettes and flashlight, and went out to the balcony. As soon as I went outside, I lit up a cigarette and started canvassing on the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Could it have all been in my head? What about Midnight hearing the noise? Could he be feeding off my paranoia? I started to calm down and relax again, and that's when my eyes started to adjust to the darkness. I kept smoking, and just stared at the stairs and trees next to our cabin, and that's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin, that was around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between 2 branches. It was squatted on a branch, and its arms were extended above its head, holding onto a branch above it. What the hell is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing, and just stood there staring at it motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and stare, pacing behind me, and lightly barking at the same time. The thing did not move. I put my cigarette out, and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction. But something in my head kept screaming not to, so I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight out with me. Once I was indoors, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated to bed. But later on in the night, I heard tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was I had a feeling as if someone was trying to invite me to open the door, but at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and to not move. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed there where I was. I eventually passed out and woke up in the morning and everything was normal. The rest of the week I spent there was non-eventful, and nothing else out of the ordinary happened. I totally admit that it could have all been in my head. A lot of stuff had been going on, and I was pretty messed up from all the drama. But still, how did Shadow know the thing was there if it was in my head?
When I was 11 or 12, we lived in a small house made of mud and stone, a lot like our house now. It was 2 of my brothers and I in the house. Everyone else had gone to the James feast and left us to tend to the sheep. We were getting ready for bed when we heard the dogs going crazy outside. Thinking it was nothing more than coyotes howling in the distance, we told them to be quiet. We began to drift off into sleep, and the dogs would not shut up. Somehow, I was able to go to sleep for a few hours. Then I woke up very late in the night. It was very quiet and still in the house, save for my brother's snoring and breathing. I realized I needed to use the outhouse and woke up my brother to take me there. He teased me about being scared, which I certainly was. We went out with our flashlights to the outhouse. The dogs began with their crazed barking out in the sagebrush, going from one place to the next. My brother went first, and I waited outside for him. While waiting, I tried to follow the dogs with my flashlight. Suddenly, there was a very loud whine from one of the dogs. Then, everything went quiet again. It was really too quiet for that time of year. Not even the sheep were making noise. Suddenly, I heard a few of the dogs going completely mad by the truck. When I looked over, there was this man. He was unbelievably tall, leaning one arm on the cab roof of the truck. He was looking at the dogs for a little, and then suddenly kicking one of them. They all scattered in different directions. The thing looked up at me, and I saw its face. It had a pure white face, like a full moon, 2 burning red eyes, and a slight smile that was pure black. I could not move or make a sound. It began to walk toward me with long strides, until it finally towered over me. All I began to see was a dark red, like the color of blood when you cut the throat of a sheep. I kept getting deeper and deeper into its eyes. I could faintly hear my brother coming out of the outhouse. With this, the thing looked up at him. Reality came rushing back to me. I noticed that my brother was too distracted with his buckle to realize what was going on. I also noticed this thing's long hands hovering just inches from my head. Its skin was black ash, and he smelled like a bloated dead animal in summer. I was still unable to move or speak. The Skinwalker began to move toward my brother. Finally noticing this figure, my brother became paralyzed as I was. Closer and closer it drew, reaching an arm out towards my brother's head. Something finally snapped in me, and I became unbearably angry. I broke from the trance and lunged at the Skinwalker, raising my arms like a wild animal and baring my teeth at it. A growl came out that I never knew I could make. I became angrier at the thing that was trying to hurt us. It kept that smile at first, but the angrier I got, the more the smile faded. Finally, with everything I had, I began to make this primal roar at it. It fell backwards and ran away into the night. Looking back at me, its eyes were dim and dull, its smile now long since gone. The next morning, the family returned home from the feast. After relaying the story to my parents, they quickly hired a medicine man.
About 11 years ago, a Mexican guy told me a similar story. We were in a small town in Oklahoma with a decent-sized native population. This guy was the nicest dude you'd ever want to meet, and was about 35 at the time. He had a family, honest, good-natured guy that I could never see making anything up without reason. It was late one night, and we were talking about an abandoned building at the campus of a small community college that had been used for housing. Supposedly it was haunted. A friend and I wanted to sneak in and check it out, and he advised us not to, and mentioned that he once lived in an apartment on campus, and a few strange things had happened. Stuff like hearing footsteps upstairs in a different apartment, and a fridge opening and closing. Then someone mentioned the upstairs was empty. He figured someone was squatting there, so at 1 a.m. he heard it and grabbed a baseball bat. There was a staircase that led up there, so no way someone could have gotten out before he started. He opened the door. Nothing but an old, non-working fridge on the opposite end. He didn't stay long after his doors began to open and shut by themselves, but he claimed he wasn't nearly as freaked out as the time he was in Mexico. He was driving back from the US after visiting family. His wife was in the passenger seat asleep. He wasn't too far from the border, so he decided to keep driving a little after midnight instead of stopping somewhere for the night. It was sort of a desert-type road, and he says he was going about 65 miles an hour when he noticed something in his peripheral vision. It was in the darkness out of the passenger window. Something was out there, and it was keeping up with him. Obviously, this shook him up. He hit the gas. 70 miles an hour? 75? 80? 85? It was still keeping up, and at this point it was almost too absurd that he thought he could just be his tiredness playing tricks on his eyes. Until it changed direction. Instead of moving parallel with his car, it began to angle back towards the road in a manner to intercept the vehicle. As it got closer, more lights hit, and he said in no uncertain terms that it looked like a human. It was slightly shadowed from the darkness, but it was certainly a humanoid form. He accelerated to 90, and a few seconds later, it angled back into the darkness and was gone. As he finished the story, I could tell his eyes were on the verge of tears in fear, and his hands were trembling. And this was a tough, no bullshit dude. It physically struck him to the core just to recall it. Not surprisingly, he said he's never going back to Mexico.
Hey guys, Black Eyed Blonde here, and thank you so much for listening. Oh, were you expecting Mort? Sorry, he's over on my channel setting up the Skinwalker traps, and we could really use your help. So why don't you head on over there and join us? Don't keep me waiting.